Typically they start about 8 months prior, if not a year prior. We're always working on many things at the same time. We're definitely not starting something and then releasing it in 2 weeks and then starting again and releasing that in 2 weeks. And everything is so different that there's almost like not a very standardized way of making all the things, because we have to almost like reconfigure our own working processes to make every new thing.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts from an idea at some point.
And that really is kind of like the underlying structure for all of Mischief. Every member of the Mischief team is involved in that idea generation process, and we come up with thousands and thousands of ideas, some of which are obviously, you know, terrible, but it's sort of like it's like a process of working out a muscle. You have to keep doing it to stay in shape and keep coming up with better ideas. No, I mean, certainly there's a running theme through a lot of projects that Mischief has put out. I think that it's often it's very fruitful to play in gray areas, places where sort of something is not yet resolved or something is getting weird. So a lot of times we are looking out for places where consumerism and capitalism are starting to get strange, because that generally means that there's meat to play with. This is actually how we got into sneakers in the first place, as there was this confluence of kind of the extreme hype cycle of product drops, plus this financialization of everything, where every physical asset was becoming something that people would look at as an investment, right? There were people talking about like, oh, you know, sneakers they're not footwear, they're sculptures that everyone can buy in mass, you know? And when you start to have all of these things interacting, it creates an environment where stuff is gonna happen that's kind of weird or goofy. And when we see things like that, often what we say is, well, let's extrapolate that. Let's take that to the nth absurd degree. And a lot of different projects that we've done can be viewed through a similar lens. Well, you have paintings, which, if you're a very successful artist, you figure out one style of painting that people love to buy, and then you do it over and over and over and over again, and the painting becomes merchandise. And so we look at that and we say, well, we can take that further. We can make 1,000 copies of this Andy Warhol drawing and kind of like render its substance down into this merchandised object and sort of distribute the originality across those things.
And then Kevin writes a manifesto in about 2 minutes.
That's always the goal. One draft, no edits.
0 edits.
Cold beer.
I mean, I think we all individually have different ways of going about it. I think coming up with an idea is a very personal thing at some level. And you just have to sort of find the right muscle to keep flexing. I generally try to look at as much stuff as possible in the world and just spit it back out.
I do the opposite. I close my eyes.
Yeah.
I close one eye and just kind of like stare off into space.
Yeah.
And here we are. That's the silver bullet, folks. Yeah, I guess like at Mischief, everyone sort of speaks the same kind of like internal language of ideas and sort of like provocation, subversion of the systems around us. And so more often than not, someone will have an idea that immediately starts to get like refined and even remixed by people at Mischief. So it starts to like evolve and take a more clearer and clearer form over time until it gets to the point where it's like, okay, there's a pretty clear vision of how to make this, or like what this will look like at the end of the day. So now let's work backwards. How do we make this? Because chances are we've never made that before. And then that is a whole production process that is basically variable based on the idea. Yeah, there's definitely like a particular moment in some of our projects, not necessarily all of them, but there's a handful of like MSCHF releases where the project is not complete until the audience takes control of it and finishes. And that's sort of like a moment of fear. Just kind of like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And often like, maybe someone could get hurt. Like something could go really wrong, or it could be glorious. And I think that that feeling is kind of like a high that is addicting. I don't think we would want that feeling too often, but there's nothing like the thrill of like handing off a project where the audience is supposed to take the reins and like see it the rest of the way through. And when that happens, that's a pretty thrilling feeling.
It really is. Those are the two big hits for us.
I mean, the Red Boots, for example, they're playing on a form that I think people really know and recognize and have, honestly, nostalgia for. And I think, honestly, a lot of MSCHF's drops do that.
I also think a lot of the work that we put out, it's almost like a slightly off-angle mirror to the reality that you're already experiencing, right? So there's like a level of familiarity which like people identify with, but it's just different enough to make them kind of like go, huh, interesting, right? Like it's hopefully like changes or evolves how you see the world a little bit, or how you like reflect on your own reality. And I think that's something that gets people to talk a little bit or to even share. But I'd also add that virality isn't necessarily like the end goal outcome of anything that we do. It's more of like an effect of what we do, or even like a tool that we're using to communicate the idea to the most impactful audience possible. And so sometimes it happens, and when it happens, it can be pretty exciting. It can also be kind of scary too. Oh, there's so many. Maybe let's take a walk really fast and come back.
Talk about Key for All, which you'll see a key hanging in a glass orb downstairs. This is a car key, and it's one of 5,000 car keys that control the same car, which was a 2005 PT Cruiser, which is arguably
a very cool car.
Very cool car. Also a very bad car. But it's just old enough that it has kind of like a very simple RFID unlock, so you can have many, many keys that can all turn it on, can all open the doors, can all let you drive it. And so we had this car, and we sold these keys across the US. And anyone who had a key could track the car with a GPS. If they found it, they could, beep, beep, click the button, the lights flash, they can drive it, they go to the grocery store, they go in the store to get their vegetables. And while they're there, maybe someone else with a key walks past the sidewalk and sees this car, and beep, beep, they drive away, and the first person is now stranded with their vegetables. And this is one of those projects where it is entirely out of our hands how it plays out over its lifespan. And we went in prepared for the fact that maybe after one day someone would drive it into a tree, and that would be the end of things. As it turned out, the car lived for 9 months, and it's become sort of one of our favorite projects to watch.
So maybe Spot's Rampage is sort of a good relic of a performance that we had done once before, where we had this Boston Dynamics robot and attached a paintball gun to the top of it. We then let people online drive the robot around and shoot the paintball gun, and Boston Dynamics got very upset at us, and they subsequently killed our robot. And so in memoriam, we put a bunch of guns on top of it, because their one call out about the project was they didn't want to associate their robot with weaponry, despite the fact that it is a company that has been funded by the military and is used in scenarios where that could potentially be the case. So I mean, looking at it, it's a great relic of an action that we had to deal with.
Yeah, okay, so Mischief Wholesale, there's a really good exhibit for that project downstairs, which obviously everyone will see, but part of like the early thinking of Mischief is, you know, we always wanted to have such a high caliber of output, and part of that requirement was never resorting to the idea of just like printing a design on a t-shirt or socks and selling it as like merchandise. We designed 1,000 pairs of socks, all with the same design, which Kevin is wearing right here actually. We designed 1,000 pairs of these, but instead of offering them for sale one at a time, we instead put them all 1,000 pairs on a pallet and offered that up, the entire pallet for sale for $5,000. Therefore selling it completely wholesale. So instead of selling merch, we said we were selling a monopoly to the only merchandise Mischief has ever produced. And if someone would be so bold to spend $5,000 and take that financial risk, they would control that market, and it would be up to them to figure out how to earn their money back and maybe even turn a profit. That was another really cool one of, we don't know what's gonna happen until it happens, right? Like, will anyone be crazy enough to buy it? And then if they are crazy enough to buy it, what will happen to them? What ended up happening was a mother of, I think, 3 in Florida was told about this project by her kid like earlier that week. Her kid was like, I love Mischief, you should buy these socks, and she did it. She bought the socks, and over the first week, actually I think in like the first couple of days, made her money back, and then over the next week or two, like 2x or 3x her money. And along the way, like infiltrated all of these like internet communities where she was like selling socks. She's kind of became like a micro celebrity in these communities, and they started referring to her as the sock queen. And then she started emailing us and signing her emails as the sock queen. So that was like another really great example of the audience takes control of the work and then finishes it. And so in the exhibition, you'll be able to see just sort of like the scale of objects that this person actually purchased. Yeah. Oh yeah. But legally, we might not be able to talk about a lot of them.
Yeah.
Let's see, we did a project called White Whale, which was a very simple setup. It was sort of like a scavenger hunt where we had a telephone number.
It was the area code and then a few more digits. I think they had to like fill in 3 or 4.
Yeah. So the sort of the possibility space for the phone number was somewhere in the tens of thousands.
Yeah.
And the idea was that people would basically just have to brute force call phone numbers to try to find this one without really knowing what was behind it. It turns out that the way we chose our starting random numbers meant that a couple of people in the New York area got like thousands and thousands of phone calls the next day from all of these various Mischief participants just calling. It's like, hey, is this Mischief? Is this Mischief?
I see.
I think for like 3 people in the world, this drop was like the most surreal day ever. And they sent us some great emails because they were not super thrilled about it.
They were pretty unhappy.
And we always refused to answer that one line, what is Mischief? Someone emailed us and said, I understand that you're like a company or whatever. And I think that
she was right.
Yeah, if we could get away with it, that's the one line that we would always use to say what is Mischief.
Yeah, I think that's what people should try to take away something. I think that's what audience should take away.
I agree. It's welcome and thank you for coming.
Tag us on Instagram with what you take away from this exhibition. All right, cool.